Hello, everyone. Welcome to LOA Uncorked. This is Holly.
And this is Jeanna.
And Jeanna.
Yes, I know.
I know.
You manifested
a super famous, really cool lady.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I'm glad she's here. So I mean, no offense, Lisa, but I'm tired of hearing about it. Like then we can like revel in the beauty of the conversation on the backside versus anticipate for so long.
It's so true.
Yeah,
I know she has to put up with me jumping up and down. So today we have Lisa Tahir. She is an author for the Chiron Effect, Healing Our Core Wounds Through Astrology, Empathy, and Self-Forgiveness.
Amen.
And it was also a book endorsed by His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, which is super, super cool.
We got to hear about that.
Pause on that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That's really incredible. But what I want to say, Jeanna, and this is exciting, and I've never said this before. Lisa has taken astrology and psychology. She put it in a blender, and guess what happened?
Yeah.
A better smoothie than you've ever eaten. Okay, listen. It's called Psychoastrology. And I swear to you, I can't make a better blender than that. Okay.
Well, no, but
blenders.
I will say, if you've listened to the podcast before, all the listeners, you've talked about how important astrology is to understanding human makeup, and you become more empathetic, understanding. You kind of, you can see the wiring a bit better if you understand astrology, and it ties directly to how people behave, which is so yes, it's beautiful.
Well, I want to welcome Lisa to the show. We both are so delighted that you're here. Welcome, Lisa.
Jeanna and Holly, thank you so much for having me on LOA Uncorked. I am delighted to be with you both and our audience.
I love it. And I wanted to start out by just saying and giving you so much appreciation, because when I look at your book and read your book, there is, I was trying to figure out the perfect word, Jeanna, and all I could think of was the richness and like the richness of what's written in there. And it mirrors the richness of your life. And I love your kitty cat. I was hoping your kitty cat would come on our show.
Yes, this is baby. She loves being in the interview.
Oh, baby, we love you, baby.
She's like, I heard the start button, so I'm here.
Yes.
I love it. Well, she can come and she can meow anytime. But I don't want to lose my thought of appreciation here, because it's really mirrors your journey, your credentials, your passion, your pursuit. You feel that in the work. And even though it starts out with this big thing called Chiron, which we're going to figure out what that is to everybody, there is, it's part astrology that any one of our listeners are going to be able to wrangle. It's easy, but it has this depth of digging deep into who you are as a person, how to live more joyfully. And I really believe there's no stone uncovered. So we can go anywhere here, but I just thought I'd start with that appreciation.
Thank you, Holly. I wanted to reveal some of those experiences in my life to model and permit you as the reader, as the listener, to do the same, and to release shame, release judgment of yourself, step into self-forgiveness, having empathy, first and foremost for yourself as a foundation, to be able to really extend that to others in an authentic way.
I love that. And you were very vulnerable in the book. And I think that that's, one of the things that really drew me into the work. And once you tell your story, you're like, okay, I look at my story a little bit differently. I have been looking at my story forever. And I read part of your book, and it was the hypervigilant and the trauma. And I knew that I wasn't physically abused, but I was emotionally not, I was neglected emotionally because my parents lost a child prior to me, and they never got over it.
Wow.
And they weren't there. And so, but I never thought that impacted me. And so when I read your book, and I was like, oh, I'm hyper vigilant, and I do this while I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. And I started to cry. So this is what I was telling Jeanna. I didn't tell you this, actually.
You didn't tell me what made
And
you
I
cry.
started to cry about that. And I thought, oh my God, I'd never put that together. So I just, big kudos to you for being vulnerable enough to express yourself in every way to help you know, all your readers, everybody you touch to heal as well. So I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. Your word permission is a big word. Like, you know, by modeling the way, it does give people permission to show up and be, let that guard down, let all those all those safety measures that you put in place diligently for years and years to protect. The only way we walk through and make significant change is if you let those guards down with those that you feel safe with. And so
absolutely
impressive as an author of a book to be able to do that.
Yeah,
so
I love that.
Incredible.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, maybe you can start off by telling our audience about psychoastrology. I love that, by the way. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And what that is, and then what's Chiron, and how to, you know, maybe a little. Jeanna, you always ask about the journey.
I agree with everything she just said. And there's so much, like Holli had mentioned, so much depth to your background. I think what would be helpful, and we've spent a lot of time on the podcast highlighting stories of incredible humans like yourself that have really gotten quiet, listened to whispers, and kind of forged their own path that feels authentic and like you're giving back in a way that you feel like you're designed to give back. So maybe if you could just, in addition to explaining, because this psychoastrology is super fascinating, maybe weave in the journey and kind of how you arrived where you are today and what were some major milestones about your background.
Sure, Jeanna and Holli. For me, when I look back on my journey, kind of a pivotal moment for me was when I was 19 and my mom kicked me out of the house unexpectedly. And it really riveted me and my life. I talk about that a bit in the very last chapter of the book, Medicine for the Soul. And I spent the next, it's not an exaggeration to say, almost 25, 30 years, you know, trying to, in different ways, consciously and unconsciously regain my confidence and feel valuable and worthy without knowing the Chiron component centered around my value and worth. When I discovered that 5 years ago in writing and researching the book. And so I spent so many years, I think, kind of unnecessarily possibly just doubting myself. And I'm not alone in that. So many of you, they're patterns, they're patterns that we have in our lives based upon what we believe to be true about and for ourselves. And so the healing journey is found in really identifying, looking at those thoughts and giving ourselves permission, again, permission to release the ones that don't serve and really replacing them with statements we are going to start living into, becoming more of, and creating life based upon these new possibilities for us. And I spent a lot of years not knowing how to do that for myself, though I was able to help a lot of clients along the way. And sometimes you might find it can be easier to connect and reach others than your own personal psychology. Has that been
100%? 100%.
Yeah. And so I really, I wrote the book just asking the universe 5 years ago, what is beyond the story of our woundedness? That story is so familiar to me. And I think many of you, having been in therapy as a client, as well as being a therapist to others for over 20 years, I wanted to find something to really like shift, really create like a positive shift to live the rest of my life as the best of my life. You hear that in so many different ways. And in meditation, that's when I heard Chiron. And I didn't know a lot about Chiron besides the Carl Jung, the Jungian archetype of the wounded healer, and was just sent down these rabbit holes to start Googling and researching and reading and really stumbling upon the brilliance of Chiron in this discerning of your patterns. In astrology, as you both know, Chiron is a placement in your astrological chart, like your sun sign, like your moon, like your rising sign. And whenever I had astrological readings, no one ever talked about Chiron. So I was totally unfamiliar. And I started to see so much potential here for healing. If you understand what you feel embarrassed about, the parts of yourself you want to edit or hide, from telling people who you are and what you've been through, it's like that just builds up layer upon layer of judgment about yourself. And that doesn't serve for you to be authentically who you are, all of you, all parts, all facets. We all have these facets like a diamond, and some are more beautiful than others. And it's really by polishing up what we decide are undesirable aspects of ourselves, that they can actually become beautiful by loving, by empathizing with ourselves. So I'm going to pause to check in with y'all what that feels like to you.
Oh my gosh.
It's so true. I mean, I love.
Well, and I was even thinking, you were talking about, I think the last 2 years with COVID has really, we've talked quite a bit about it on the podcast too. I feel like we are slowly changing what resilience for a human being is. And I feel like resilience was always the stiff upper lip. You kind of keep going. You kind of put your shit behind you in the past, in the corner, and you don't say, yes, you don't, Lisa's a very, very fabulous guest. I'm trying to keep my mouth in check.
No, it's okay.
You have to be your authentic self.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
You put that crap away and you pretend it's not there, and you go forward and you create this image, and and I feel like over the last 2 years, and I think as we continue to become smarter human beings around full self, whole self, we have to find ways to acknowledge what happens and work through it versus hiding it away. And the Chiron sort of almost makes you do that.
Yeah.
Or you're just miserable for the entire, but you know what I mean? But it kind of forces that process.
Well, it's deep self-reflection is what I would call from an astrology standpoint. But I think,
but it's sad I'm just now going through it, because I could have used it a while ago.
I have some questions. I have some questions. Like, so does everybody have core wounds? And then, what you were saying, Lisa, was you were saying that looking at Chiron, and I also wanted you to talk about the house placement.
Sure.
As another layer, because we always say astrology is the layers of the onion. Is that the mystery machine clues as to where to look because of where your core wounds are? So is everybody wounded? And then Chiron, is that the place to start peeking under the sheets to find it? If you haven't found it, because personal honesty is a thing.
Yeah,
and some people, I want to talk about that too. There's a lot of things I want to talk about, because I'm like, well, how do we know where does everybody have the wounds? How do we know how to find them?
Sure.
And then this Chiron is the peeking under the hood sort of thing.
Yeah. No, and I think the best place to start is in your suggestion around, does everyone have core wounds and what are they? And so this is actually on a spectrum. And for sake of the book title, it was hard to talk about this as a spectrum. Chiron, the placement of Chiron in your birth chart, revealing 1 of 12 on a spectrum between vulnerability and core wounding. So on the left, it's an area where you're vulnerable, you're sensitive. It on the right, and in the deepest sense, it would be a core wound from trauma, from sexual abuse, from an abandonment, from something that's, really deeper and harder to navigate through, versus am I sensitive to being criticized? So does that clarify? It's a spectrum. And
I love that.
So the answer is yes. Everyone is wounded in some way.
I would say
in a
has
spectrum.
A vulnerability.
Has a vulnerability. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a spectrum, and you can heal. You can move up the spectrum from being totally deactivated, in this area of your life, to sometimes stepping on that landmine. It triggers an unhealed energetic attachment. That's how I define it in my book. That sometimes something happens in a relationship, for instance, and it's like, oh, ouch. It brings up all of this emotion that goes beyond the person or situation that triggered it. And that's when you've stepped on typically like a Chiron wounding, something that takes you deeper, takes you younger, into something you experienced as a child, perhaps centered around neglect, abandonment, and such. And for others of you that didn't have those kind of woundings, it might just be you're sensitive. It might be more of a preferential, I don't really like that, versus it takes you down and debilitates you emotionally. Does that feel clear?
Perfect.
That makes total sense. And so the Chiron, when we talk about the sign, the zodiac sign, and then there's a house placement.
Yes.
And both of those things we will link it in the show notes.
Yeah.
We can, Lisa has it on her
Yes.
website. You can
Yeah.
look it up. Chiron, the sign is kind of by date.
Right.
And then the house is, you have to know your birth time.
Exactly.
And if people don't know their birth time, how do you did give them advice in your book, but I can't remember what that was.
I did. It's just not, once most everyone knows your date of birth and your place of birth, and that's significant enough to know what your Chiron vulnerability / wounding is.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the house placement is simply the area of your life that it manifests, which you
Gotcha.
typically know that. Once you identify where these patterns in your life are, you kind of know intuitively, does this happen in the workplace versus in my romantic relationship versus with my siblings? So that part is more easily discernible on your own.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. But so you were saying that to look at, where you're sensitive or maybe your triggers and, maybe just where you just don't feel yourself. That's one area to get honest with yourself, because I think, we've talked about this. We actually did a podcast on this.
Yes,
like, how do you uncover that you're not being honest with yourself, that you actually in a relationship that you don't like? Okay. Like you tend to go into survival mode. You have kids or whatever the issue is. And you tend to not be honest about it to yourself.
And that's self-protective, I would suggest, in that kind of scenario, Holly, like how hard it would be to realize you're not being satisfied, gratified, seen or heard in your relationship, but you have all these attachments and connections and children. It would be hard to just up and leave. So I think it's kind of progressive acceptance and discerning what is the path here. Is it something repairable with my partner versus not?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, kind of getting back to, the shit in the closet.
Yeah.
I think for some people, depending on where the wound is, and I think society is sort of, and I think we're getting better, but I think we've sort of encouraged people just to kind of put your head down, unless it's radically broken, there's abuse. Your happiness isn't warranting churning all that up, right? And making those choices. That's how it is felt.
That's a really beautiful.
That's how
way
it
of
is
saying
felt.
it.
Yes, absolutely.
And how dare you? I mean, shoot, look at Adele, for goodness sakes. Look at Adele saying, how dare I, be so, she used the word selfish to make my happiness as important as my son's. It's interesting.
And Jeanna's referring to the Oprah interview with Adele, where she's coming out with her new album, and she was being very vulnerable about her divorce and having a child, and making people comment about her making that decision so early.
Yeah.
Oh, should you stay 20 years? I mean, like what happened?
Right. And what is, what's
people make
repairable
judgments
to people. And so, it's fascinating to me. I think, like I said, I think I'm hopeful as we evolve as human beings, happiness and joy should be the top of everyone's list.
Yeah. And how to do that in a way that's more of a win-win instead of someone loses, because I think there can be a path and a way for people, for everyone to have what they want.
Right. No,
absolutely. And I think your book actually demonstrates that there is a pace to joy. You give exercises, you give affirmations. Yes. I mean, this thing is packed. Okay, people, even if you don't care about Chiron, it's packed with so many other things in there, but I think you should care about Chiron. So it does give you that glimpse into what could be sensitivity or even debilitating. And so I wanted Jeanna so another part of Chiron is Chiron takes 50 years to come about 50 years to come around. So you have your birth chart, which is your astrology chart. And then you have transits that, the sun, the moon, everything is transiting around your chart. And Jeanna's Chiron is coming full circle to meet its birth Chiron in Aries. And so Lisa, she is an Aries Chiron with a first house
placement.
So can you tell us about that? And I think you might have some, you might actually align around that as well.
Yeah,
So you're probably,
I would love to.
yeah.
No, Jeanna,
What's
I
she
share with you.
experiencing? Yeah,
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I share with you Chiron in the sign of Aries in the
Right.
first house, having to do with your self-esteem, your identity, the way you think, your confidence. And it's something that's not readily apparent to other people. This is
Right.
you with you in between your own two ears, the things you're telling yourself about yourself. You might have experienced things in your life like feeling not good enough
Mhm.
despite professional achievement, others perceiving you as being so awesome, really loving you, and yet feeling like you might have to keep working to be loved,
Mhm.
to earn love. Has that ever been a pattern in your life?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and even people pleasing,
100%.
which I sense
The
you've been on the
worst.
journey to
Mhm.
unlearn and
Mhm.
really stand for. Like, I sense
Yep.
that you've done a lot of work on
I
that in your
have for
life.
sure. I think the
Yeah.
podcast has actually been quite helpful. I mean,
Yeah.
it's perfectly placed as it should be. And, but yes, it has forced all of those.
For you to
Uh,
stand in your value and worth,
mhm,
to be on a
mhm,
podcast and talk about what you
mhm.
think and believe. Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. As hard as
And
it is for other people, because I'm no longer pleasing everyone. Sometimes
hmm,
it doesn't go so well.
how has that
So
been for you to handle?
yeah, it's been part of the journey. I actually have had a couple of situations like that, and I'm comfortable. I stand by everything I said and everything I do. So, and it's just been, I've treated it just like the learning of the podcast. Help me understand why it's uncomfortable. Why, yes, it's been fascinating to watch. And the more comfortable I am doing what I love, the more comfortable I am standing with questions,
Yes. Yes.
if that
To
makes
that.
sense. Yeah.
Is standing in your truth.
Yeah.
And Lisa, it's interesting because she is in this Chiron return, the heat turns up.
Mhm.
And so like it becomes more of an urgency in between the two ears that you have to address
Mhm.
it.
Yes.
And I think you felt that sense of urgency too.
Yes. For quite, yeah, for
Mhm.
before the podcast.
Mhm.
And it's definitely heated up
Mhm.
for sure.
How long have you both been doing this podcast?
For 2 years,
Mhm.
a little over
Okay.
2 years.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Perfect timing
Yes,
then.
indeed. It was perfectly placed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Without even knowing. I mean, I don't think we looked at our charts before we started anything.
No.
So,
You know, and even
we
it
were
could
ready.
be interesting to look at the Chiron of your podcast. I'm just thinking
I
the
love
date-
that.
And because
Yes.
Chiron can also
Brilliant.
reveal in your relationship and the date you started an LLC for your business, and even just see if there's a vulnerability, if there's a sensitivity to the podcast, and maybe not. I sense there's such good flow and energy, but
Right.
sometimes it can just be interesting to note that. So in case
Agreed.
something comes up, it's like, oh, okay, this is where we might, have an issue
Have some challenge. Mhm.
to be ahead of.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that. A friend of ours said that, everything has a soul, has an energy.
Yeah.
The podcast has an
Mhm.
energy. So I'm glad you brought up that Chiron is, there's an energy for everything. And you had this wonderful little chapter you put in the book on the United States and its Chiron. And if you
Yeah.
want to go, listen to that, that
Mhm.
is, that's fascinating. Work that you put in the book as well, that everything does have an energy and maybe not the same type of souls we think of,
But a
soul,
trajectory or
yes,
some sort of,
in the
path.
healing
Yeah.
that we're having to do here in our nation.
Mhm.
Right. I talked about the psychoastrology of the USA when the
Yeah.
Declaration of Independence
Yeah.
was signed, being an Aries in the fourth house.
Yeah.
And it struck me as odd, like this can't be right, that the most powerful nation in the country has this core wounding by abandonment. But when I look to the
Mhm.
fourth house, which has to do with family, which has to do with the United
Yeah.
States as a family and the leaders as the representative parents, and we can see the issues we have around education, in rural and urban areas, kids in schools without books, without supplies, and inadequate health care for
Wow.
all, and just the way that we rush to the aid of other countries and yet have neglected our own, the family of each
Fascinating.
other at the top levels. So that's when it started to make sense to me,
Mm.
where the US has some growing and healing to do, and how we really take care of each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I I looked at my chart, and my chart is Pisces. So I have a lot of Pisces in my chart. So I'm overrun with Pisces, but Pisces in the 11th house. And so I was like, okay, let's take a look at that. And, I was like, self-care, in groups.
And putting on your oxygen mask first.
Yes.
Making sure, like they say, when you get on the airplane, which feels counterintuitive. It's like you want to put it on your kids first, but it says put the mask on first, so then you can care for others and not pass out, literally.
Right.
Yes,
and for you, I wonder if that's something you've had to learn, to really give from a place of being full versus depleted.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because I will continue to give and not recognize that I'm depleted.
And in community, in that 11th house of community and groups, friends, associations, has that been where it's manifested?
For sure. And no boundaries. Like I didn't even know what a boundary was. Okay. So like, what is
I've
that?
done my job. I've done a little bit of job.
She helps me with boundaries.
I've helped. I mean, my Aries does know a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's interesting that you bring that up, because even at Holly's last birthday, we had a kind of a group of girlfriends. And you remember one of your good girlfriends actually was really passionate about making sure Holly heard how hard it is to support somebody like her, because she is such a strong giver and sometimes isn't the best receiver, and everybody's got to sit down or lay down sometimes and let others care. And so it's just and you had a lot going on in your life at that time. And but again, I mean, she looks fabulous all the time, everything's perfect, like we go out, there's not a stop in her. She's not wired to stop. And so you have to, as friends, it's hard to figure out how to step in.
How you're really doing, I sense. Like, And I think as women too, we're really so good at acting fine, even when things might not be. And I think it's something to give ourselves permission to be authentic and transparent with those we can trust, to say, hey, I'm having an emotional struggle around this, and really just let ourselves emote that, let ourselves put it out there to be supported.
I love that. I mean, I love that. Again, permission. That seems to be a good theme, particularly for women, but I think for everybody, really. There's another thing that you said in your book that I really loved, because I like to unearth what's existing inside of ourselves that we don't even recognize. I mean, I find that to be fascinating. And one of the things that you said was cultivating curiosity about your defensiveness.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because that is, I mean,
I couldn't talk about that. I'm sure she's planted this question just for somebody's benefit.
I mean, we try to say, like, I always talk about triggers, like if you're triggered, you need to look within, but I loved how you said cultivating curiosity about defensiveness. And I was like, well, I hadn't thought about it like that. That's another way of illuminating things, but can you talk a little bit about, what prompted you to put that in there?
I'd love to, because I think, again, even that statement that when we're triggered, it's like, look at yourself, or when somebody bothers you, it's because you're like that in some way. And I never found those cliches really helpful to help me understand myself or make a change. And so when I started, to kind of meditate upon that and ask, what is the deeper truth here? It came to my mind, like, if I can be in a mental position of curious, okay, this person said something, did something, and I'm been out of shape, I'm angry, or I'm wounded, or I'm feeling rejected. Like, what is that about? What does that remind me of? With curiosity and not judging myself or them, like really, taking some time out and space away I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt right now before I say anything, to go deeper into my experience of this. And if it brings up anything from your past, when have you felt like this? When were you treated like this and felt this way? And really attend to that younger part of yourself. You hear about the inner child, ego state, and typically when we're triggered in that way, it does stimulate this unhealed younger part of ourselves that never had the attunement, the attending to, and we just grow up, time goes on, and it's like, get over it. You have to go to work and do all kinds of shit, and
Yep.
without the adequate tending to of this wound or whatever happened. That's why it keeps coming up, so that we can actually love ourselves enough to heal it. And then if you choose to speak to that person, if they're open to a more compassionate, open dialogue of, hey, like, what did you mean by that? Or,
Mhm.
that was hard for me to hear. Is there another way you can say it? Or, what's going on here? And some people can talk to you at that level and some
Yeah.
can't, but it's important that you talk to yourself at that level. That's where the healing happens.
I love
So
that.
good.
I was thinking as you were talking, and my original question was, but I'm going to go from there. I mean, I'm skyrocketing outside of that question, but because originally when I looked at your book, I was like, oh, I wonder if I could take this book and work with it there. If people could take the book and work with a therapist on and educate. Most psychotherapists do not understand this. I mean, you are the pioneer here, and I thought, oh, we could do that and we could work on it. But now my skyrocketing opinion is, I'm wondering, and maybe you have this and I just didn't unearth it in my travels, but I wonder if we should have like friend where you feel supported, support groups where you get together and talk about where your Chiron is, like your first meeting is Chiron and placement, and you share. And
Great
then
idea.
in your book, you have affirmations and things. So then you'd all go about giving each other homework, and then you come in and you talk about your defensiveness.
Talk about how it went.
And you're not even paying anybody that way. You could just have group therapy.
A peer-led group.
A peer-led group where people kind of just discuss it, because I do feel like it is hard. Like I said, I mean, I've been looking at myself for a long time. And I'm like, and just today, when I was re-looking at that piece of your book, I went to tears and had an aha moment. It's like, that could be had in a group setting too. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I love that, Holly. I think because when we're witnessed, I talk about this as well, when we're witnessed and our emotions and that emotional release that you had, it just helps it really go deeper. It's great when that happens on your own, but to share that with someone else and them hold you compassionately, it's like, oh, like it really frees you from ever feeling, I think, that level of pain or aloneness, because you're really being seen in that moment.
Well, and like you said earlier, Lisa, some people have the capability to have a real open, more direct follow-up conversation on something that hit someone, hit a trigger, or hit something that part of their wounding. Others are not. And I think in group settings like that too, you're almost modeling the way for people who might not have ever been witnessed or have the internal capability to have, so they know how to show up for their friends, right?
Exactly.
So not only just for those that are wounded, but those there to support personal growth. And you have a very close, plenty of girlfriends, I have very close relationships that I don't have the same personal relationship I have with Holly, right?
Yeah.
So there is this little bit of, oh, how far can I go? What will help here? How do I show up for this person if that's not your normal relationship? Where that's been our relationship for a very long time. So it does sort of, give people permission just to try something different, or at least, models the way a little bit.
Absolutely. And see how that feels and makes it user friendly. Because if you don't know, you just don't know if it's unfamiliar.
Right. And like we've talked about on the podcast, if you don't have a relationship like we have, if you don't have friendships like this that are, you feel secure, you feel safe, you feel supported,
seen and heard,
seen and understood,
respected.
and she can say stuff. She can say stuff to me that I don't feel that same way. I might go, oh gosh, that sort of stung a little bit. Yeah, it hit a little close to home. But I always know and trust, and we've had this conversation on podcasts. I know and trust she's doing it not to hurt me, but to better me, right? It's a gift she's giving. And sometimes I miss the first 14 or 15 times she tries. So sometimes she's got to be a little bit louder. Yeah. I have to hear it, but but there are a lot of people who don't have those relationships.
Right.
Well, I do think that's why I'm saying I'm still going here, right? Like
No,
you
I
can see
know.
my
No, I
eyeballs.
can.
Okay, my
Yeah.
crazy
They
eyeballs.
scare me
Okay.
when they look like
I
that,
know.
but that's okay.
But I think the book has an energy and a vibration that if you have people, and you don't even have to, maybe they don't even have to be your friends, but if you have a community or people that resonate with it, that the love and the vibration that Lisa, you put in the book,
Thank you.
emanates from that, and it will come. So if you sent the intention,
Yes.
and the one part of the story that Jeanna didn't say was, shout out to Michelle, who said it in the beginning. She said, to be seen, Lisa, you were saying to be seen, to be held. And she said, right now, Holli, we want you to lay down on the energetic cart and we will carry you.
Wow.
That's what she said.
That's exactly what she said.
That's beautiful.
And that was beautiful. And
she said it in such a beautiful way.
It was much more eloquent than we did, Jeanna, but that's okay.
Yeah,
Thank you,
remember
Michelle.
the cart and the energetic. I mean, I didn't get that far, but yes, it was beautiful. I mean, and I think it was important for Holli to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. But they were holding space for me, but people would hold space for healing. And, I just think that like everybody should be able to do that no matter where they're at in their life or, how much money they have. I mean, they can, go to the library or get a book and
wouldn't even put out to the universe, like your show, LOA Uncorked, put out to the universe. I intend to attract these kind of friends and a supportive network and see what comes back to you. I love the name of your show and the magic, and that you talk about celebrating these moments. Celebration is so important, even in our interpersonal healing. When you don't send that angry text, when you choose to be curious instead of react, that's a moment to celebrate.
Exactly.
So I'm looking at the picture behind you both, and that's coming to mind. It's so important to self-affirm these milestones in your own development as if it were a birthday or a graduation.
Exactly. And they're you don't wait for the big ones. It's the small ones, because they
look for them every day if you can.
Every day. Exactly.
I love
everyday magic. Yeah.
Everyday magic. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I loved one of your quotes and in your book, and I wrote this down, and I don't know how it flows into what we're saying, but I just definitely wanted to make sure I quoted it before we closed out today.
Sure.
You said, life often inspires us to unexpected action if we are mindfully available to the present moment, free of judgment, and observing what is. I love that. And the way you took some of these old cliches and turned them around into a different way of communicating all throughout that book. This quote is one of those, just be present. Okay, well, what does that mean? You added the without judgment. I just find that this book is free of those cliches that you get caught in your mind, like, well, how do I show up like that? And, what is the present moment like? And I mean, truly, that's where the magic is, right?
It is. And I think feeling into that for yourself as the listener, because it's going to be unique to you, to who you are. And I encourage readers to really make this your own, your own belief system and what really lights you up, to look for those opportunities. And for myself, with this being Thanksgiving week, I had an unexpected feeling disappointed about something I wanted to do for Thanksgiving. It's not going to happen. And I felt upset about it, and just looking, reaching for a better, like, how do I handle this? I started to feel a little depressed, and I was like, what is something I'd love to do? And here in Los Angeles, there's the Fred Jordan Mission on Skid Row. You might have heard of Skid Row, where the homeless population is just so huge. And I volunteered the last few years on Thanksgiving, and I hadn't reached out this year. I sent an email on Sunday, and the person got back to me and said, can you show up tomorrow? We actually need help in the kitchen. So I went yesterday and spent the day. And when I tell you, it changed me from like the DNA level of like shifting into gratitude and appreciation. And I don't even care that my plans changed now for Thanksgiving, because just being of service. So I encourage you to look for something like that. If you're feeling sad, if you're feeling like, like not stuck, just look for something to just change that for yourself. And even if it's texting someone or calling or taking a walk or going to help someone, it always makes you feel better.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
for sure.
And I love that inspired action.
Yeah.
And I love that you didn't make yourself wrong for being disappointed, because
Right.
oftentimes we try to, you know, what is it? Spiritual. You have some spiritual bypass in her book too. Okay. Like, just no, I'm fine. Everything
Right.
is great. Okay. And no, you were like, okay, I don't feel good about this. All right. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to be in gratitude.
Right.
I'm going to do something of service, which is
Right.
always wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted
Mhm.
to offer that because I feel like, you know, the
That's true.
holidays can be a time
Yeah.
where a lot
For
comes
sure.
up. It's, you know, there could be a lot of triggers, there could be a lot of uncertainty, and just I encourage you to try to make it as authentically feeling good as you can,
Right.
and invite. So, you know, an invitation came through, so I'm doing something that's going to be really, really good on Thanksgiving in the absence of the other plan. And I think it came as a result of me determining, like, I'm just going to go be of service and see what the universe brings to me.
I love
And there
that.
it comes. Yeah.
Okay, here
Yeah.
it comes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
So when you, because you're, as Holly said, the background and all the different components where you bring, you know, subject matter expertise to the table, and you put this all in this labor of love, this book that, you know, has all these levels and feeling and heart. It's got its own pulse, according to Holly. So can you talk about what your hope was for the book and how it informs maybe your next steps? And I would just be curious.
Absolutely, Gina. You know, it's my hope, and this kind of has been revealed to me since the book has come out. I really want you to know, I really, really want people to know just how valuable they are. I want you to know how important you are. I want you to know that you matter, that regardless of what you do for a living, or if you feel like you haven't achieved certain things that others thought you should, or maybe you even thought you should, that you're right where you need to be, and to look right where you are for being good enough, for feeling your perfection. And I just really want people to know how valuable they are, and that we really make sense when you go through those layers and start turning over those rocks, you know, that you really make sense to yourself. And it's most important that you get that about you.
Right.
And then
I
you
love
can
that.
attract people that will mirror you and get you as well.
No, God, that's
I
gorgeous.
love that. It's so beautiful.
So we like to give, we don't call it homework, but we call it an assignment or some things for listeners. So if, regardless of sort of where people are at on their journey, and just, are there a thing or two or three that you feel called to share? Like, if, regardless of where you're at on your journey, just maybe best practices or rituals that you do that you feel like really contribute to people on this. So just give us 2 to 3 of Lisa's faves that you think will just really be helpful for our listeners.
Sure. One of my favorites is to take out paper, and it can be really exceptional under the new moon energy, which is really about manifestation, new beginnings. I love the new moon because it feels almost like a new year to me every month. And to write down
school year. It's like a school year.
Yeah,
go out, in
oh
fact,
my gosh,
if you used to love school time, like go out and buy yourself a new piece of paper and some new pages, because that was my favorite time of year.
Like the new notebooks, I really vibe with you on this.
Yes. Okay. Perfect.
And to write down your dreams, your aspirations from this moment, looking forward, not looking back. If there's some things you haven't done yet that really just still are popping up in the back of your head, write them down, and then ask the universe to bring these things to you during this next chapter of your life, to really just, you know, put out there the new beginnings you want, what it is you most deeply desire, without it needing to be practical or you knowing how, to really just get it out on paper, and maybe revisit that every month, or certainly a few times a year. But I think if you take it out monthly, it really keeps it fresh in your own cognition, in your own life. And the things that are obstacles that might come up at the same time, write those on a separate sheet of paper and burn them in your sink. I think that's a tangible practice.
I love this.
I love that ritual.
Find the sink furthest from the fire alarms, though.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Good.
Very
good.
practical. Thank you,
Very
Jeanna.
practical.
I appreciate that.
Love that idea. That's brilliant.
That's wonderful.
The burning part in particular.
The burning. Yeah. I like doing that. Absolutely.
Okay.
Love it. Okay. Love it.
So if our listeners want to work with you, are you available to be worked with? And what does that look like for you?
I am. And, you know, for Holly, you and Gina's listeners, I would love to offer everyone, if they just mention either of you, both of you, your show, to have a session half off the
Oh my
regular full
gosh.
fee, either individually. I do all virtual, so Zoom, FaceTime, Skype, and phone. I also have a 30-day psychoastrology intensive, so you can do a first month at half off as well, where we go through my book together and really like dial down. You get text access to, reach out with questions that I'll save up and meditate upon for the sessions during the month. So I'd love to offer your listeners half off.
See, there's the
A
community
first
that I was
time.
talking about right there.
Yeah,
I
there's
love that. Thank you for your
Yeah, that's
generosity. I think
extremely
that's
generous.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And to reach out on social media at NOLA Therapy on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, or just my website, lisa@nolatherapy.com. I know you'll have that in the
We'll have
notes.
all
we
that in the
will.
notes.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. For
Mhm.
sure. Wow. That is, listen, it's just in time for the holidays
I
too.
know.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes, for sure.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, this was is there anything else you can think of that you'd like to share with our audience, or you feel compelled to like share at this time for yourself?
I think you both are amazing, and I'm feeling so uplifted to end my day with you both. Thank you. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yeah.
And just that whatever it is you can do, you can definitely do it progressively, to take those baby steps and really believe in yourself enough. You don't have to tell anyone. I learned some of the things I've wanted to manifest. It's best not to tell anyone,
I
because you
agree.
don't want people to, in their love for you, be like, no, so just keep them to yourself and ask the universe to get that traction going, to where other people will start to see you just showing up differently for yourself, and just allow, these universal forces that love us so much to bring this magic, again, y'all's tagline, into
Yep.
your life, into fruition.
They take care of the rest. That
I
is
love it.
beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We
welcome.
appreciate you
Yeah.
and all your work, and all the best in every way to you.
Yes.
Amen. Same to both of you. I'd love to be in touch in the future.
Okay, we will.
For
and have
sure.
you both on my podcast, All Things
All right.
Therapy.
I know that's
I'd love
true.
to do that in
it.
the new year. I'd
Okay,
love that.
sounds good.
We'll
Okay,
come
let's do it.
down. We love California. So we'll come visit you.
Oh, that
Unfortunately,
sounds great. We can go to the studio.
perfect.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
Absolutely.
this is going to be
Perfect.
epic.
I
Okay.
love it.
I love it.
Okay.
All right.
Bye,
Happy
y'all. Love you.
holidays.
We
Love
love
you
you
too.
too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.